The film gets going in a ruined California desert, where a gathering of onlookers accumulate to watch a film. A squad car before long shows up at the scene and obliterates every one of the seats utilized as props. Sheriff Chad then escapes the vehicle, takes a glass of water from his partner, and starts making sense of the possibility of the film. He starts by saying that numerous minutes in the film happen with practically no explanation, giving instances of films like Romeo and Juliet, The Piano Player, and JFK. He makes sense of that all extraordinary films contain a significant element called a not great explanation because life itself is filled with no explanation. The sheriff then pours his water on the ground, stressing the demonstration to be of not an obvious explanation. It's causing me to need to pee, however, so it has some kind of force, he says. After he drives off, a bookkeeper circulates optics to everyone, and then leaves on a bike. The onlookers begin noticing the far-off scene through their optics, enthusiastically anticipating the start of the film. At first, they see just the fruitless Californian desert, making one of them comment that it's an old silent film. But suddenly, a woman identifies a dump area and sees something moving. She then eagerly suggests her friends look too. The scene shifts to the trash, where a vehicle tire named Robert suddenly becomes alive. At first, it figures out how to stand upright and then sorts out a way to move. It then encounters a plastic water bottle and hesitates for a while before rolling over it. Next, it sees a park and casually kills it. But when it comes across a glass beer bottle, it can't crush it by rolling over it. Frustrated, Robert vibrates intensely and uses psychokinetic powers to break the bottle. This excites the onlookers, and they are now fully invested in this film. In the following scene, Robert starts to step down the desert and make its way to the town. On the way, it encounters a metal can and uses its same psychokinetic ability to cause it to explode. Following this, it continues its journey and eventually takes rest under a tree. As night falls, the crowd also nods off in the outdoors, anticipating another day of watching the tire perform magic tricks. The next morning, Robert wakes up and starts its day by drinking water from a nearby lake. Just as it finishes, it is startled to see a rabbit nearby. It then starts to vibrate violently and unleashes its psychokinetic power. As Robert focuses on the rabbit, the creature suddenly explodes into pieces. This act of barbarism makes the tire truly happy, and it continues the day, proceeding joyfully through the desert. Meanwhile, the bookkeeper arrives at the site and finds the crowd snoozing in the desert. Before waking them, he rummages through the area, even taking money from two sleeping men. He then wakes the crowd and tells them to prepare for the film. Some members of the crowd, having spent the night there, complain about being hungry and wanting breakfast, but the bookkeeper ignores their complaints and asks them to get their binoculars instead, as the film is about to reach its climax. Meanwhile, Robert finds an empty road until it detects a beautiful woman driving by. It tries to use its powers on her, but only manages to stall her vehicle. As the tire rolls towards her stored car, a truck suddenly passes by and runs it over. This breaks the connection and allows the woman's car to start again. After she drives away, the enraged tire uses its powers to explode a crow. It then follows the truck to a gas station, where the driver is trying to call someone through the payphone. Not long after, the driver decides to continue his journey, only to be stopped by a mysterious standing tire. Robert soon begins to shake violently and focuses on the driver. It releases all its energy, causing the man's head to explode into several pieces. The onlookers who are watching this film enjoy the horrifying scene as they believe it is all organized. After getting his revenge, Robert goes over to a nearby desert town where it finds the beautiful woman again. She stops her car on the side of the road and checks into a hotel. Robert then watches her shower through an open door before she locks it shut. Following this, the tire makes itself comfortable in the room next to hers. It watches TV shows like a human and changes the channels using its powers before eventually falling asleep on the bed. The observers continue to watch the unfolding events, believing each one to be part of the film. Later, we discover that the bookkeeper who is behind this film is also staying at the same hotel. As he cleans his shoes, we see a live turkey alongside him. All of a sudden, he gets a call from someone whom he addresses as Master. The Master gives him some orders, and the bookkeeper vows to follow them the next morning. He then opens his briefcase full of weapons and retrieves two sharp knives to prepare the turkey. In the morning, the hotel maid enters the room where Robert is staying. She sees muddy tire tracks on the bedsheet and wonders what kind of misfit would bring a tire into the room. She then finds Robert in the shower and throws it out, figuring the guest might have played a trick on her. But this only enrages the tire, and it retaliates by exploding her head. Soon after, the hotel owner's son sees Robert reawakening and locking itself inside the room. This freaks him out, so he quickly informs his father. However, the latter doesn't believe him and thinks he's bluffing or stoned. "Stupid kid, always stoned," he mutters. The boy is then sent to get pizzas instead of bothering his father. He rides down the road on his bike just as the police arrive to investigate the maid's murder. Meanwhile, the bookkeeper arrives at the site and wakes the onlookers by offering them the cooked turkey. Having not eaten for the past 2 days, they quickly devour the food. However, a man in a wheelchair cannot participate due to his condition. The scene then shifts to the street where the inn proprietor's child shows up with pizzas. He stops before a dead crow, the same one Robert had exploded recently. He picks up the corpse and puts it on the pizzas, mumbling that these are the extra toppings, just like his father wanted. Back at the inn, Robert follows his crush to the pool and eagerly watches her plunge into the water. When she finishes relaxing and parts, it also jumps into the pool and rests for a while. Meanwhile, a young boy from the crowd starts feeling a sharp pain in his stomach. His father believes it might be because of eating too fast and assures him that the pain will go away on its own. However, more people start showing signs of illness, with some even vomiting. The person in the wheelchair, who hadn't eaten the turkey, comments that the food may have been poisoned, as he is the only one who isn't sick. Soon, all the observers, except the wheelchair fellow, faint and die on the ground. The chances of this movie checking out are looking grim. Back at the inn, cops, including Sheriff Chad, are investigating the grim murder of the servant. The inn proprietor's child tries to convince them that the tire is alive, as he had seen it going into the room where the housemaid was found dead. Sadly, they don't believe him, and his father continues to reprimand him for talking nonsense. The father is so angry that he even hammers the tire on the floor and discards it. Unexpectedly, an alarm goes off on the sheriff's watch, and he reports that their act is over. He advises the inn proprietor to return home as they have completed their part in the movie. He even tells the officers to stop the act and return to their families, to their real lives. But the confused police assure him that this is real because there is a dead body lying next to them. Sheriff Chad counters by ordering one of the officers to shoot him. Surprisingly, the shot doesn't harm him, as he is wearing a bulletproof vest with fake blood. Chad then continues to persuade his officers that the whole situation is fake and they can all return home now. The police are still confused and ask about the housemaid's dead body. Chad proudly says that it is part of the movie too. However, when the housemaid, who has no head, doesn't wake up even after the movie is over, Chad looks concerned. He confronts the inn proprietor and interrogates him about his relationship with the housemaid. As they are talking, Robert the tire suddenly appears and blasts the inn proprietor's head for abusing it earlier. Having witnessed the gruesome murder, Sheriff Chad finally wakes up from his acting and realizes that this is real life. He also acknowledges the inn proprietor's son's words and understands that the tire is on a killing spree. Soon after, he gathers his officers and apologizes for getting caught up in the movie. He then leads the police on a tire chase. Meanwhile, Robert the tire comes across a mirror and finally sees its reflection. It realizes that it has been a tire, not a human, all this time. The scene then moves to the wheelchair fellow, who is the only one alive to watch the movie. As he is busy looking through the binoculars, the bookkeeper interrupts him with a table of poisoned food. We learn that the bookkeeper intends to kill him too, and end the movie for good. However, the wheelchair fellow refuses to eat anything and asks to be left alone. The bookkeeper then tries to convince him by discussing his cherished memories. He reveals that he enjoyed killing his elder brother by crushing his head with a huge stone. While recalling his past traumas, the bookkeeper accidentally eats the poisoned food and ends up meeting the same fate as the crowd. The wheelchair fellow doesn't bother helping, as he believes it's all part of the act. Meanwhile, the police chase Robert down the road and finally confront him face to face. But this proves to be a huge mistake, as the wicked tire starts to vibrate wildly. It focuses on the lieutenant sitting in the squad car and blows his head mercilessly. After escaping from the police, Robert encounters a group burning a huge pile of tires. He is enraged to see his kind being killed in such a terrible way. The scene then jumps forward by 3 days to reveal the aftermath of a killing spree. Dead, headless bodies are lying everywhere in the city and inside supermarkets. The police continue their search for the deadly tire until they finally find it watching an auto racing program in a house, having eliminated the tenants. Sheriff Chad then comes up with a plan to kill the tire for good. He brings a mannequin that resembles the beautiful woman from earlier and rigs it with explosives. He hopes that when Robert explodes the mannequin's head, the explosives will detonate and destroy him too. Sheriff Chad then seeks help from the beautiful woman to lure Robert out of the house. They eventually succeed in doing so, but when the tire destroys the mannequin's head, the explosives fail to detonate. This enrages the sheriff so much that he decides to take matters into his own hands. He enters the house and kills Robert with his shotgun, then gives the tire to the wheelchair fellow who had been eagerly anticipating the end of the movie. Just as the sheriff and other cops leave the scene, a tricycle emerges from the house. The wheelchair fellow realizes that Robert has been resurrected and pleads for mercy. He assures the tricycle that he's just an observer and not one of the characters in the movie. However, the tricycle ignores his pleas and kills him anyway, blowing his head as well as his whole body into several pieces. This signifies that Robert has become even more powerful and savage. The movie reaches a conclusion as the tricycle rolls down the road and revives an army of tires on its way to Hollywood.